A very good evening and welcome to this edition of Breeding to Win. We're here at the Summer Cup in the Betting World VIP Marquee. What a fantastic venue to be hosting tonight's show from. But let's start straight away. A busy show, and we're kicking off with Follow the Foal that takes place out at Drakenstein Stud. We saw the foal, we've introduced you to her, and let's catch up more with Fiona and Kevin Somerville.
We are following a filly foal through her racing career and journey here at Drakenstein Stud. We've already introduced her on one of our previous shows, so we've met our filly, and we're back here again today. She's about 7 weeks old. She's by Gold Standard out of National Banker, who's standing with us now, and she's had her first visit from the farrier, and farrier Robbie Miller is with me now to talk to us about what he's seen in our little foal. Robbie, thank you for taking the time to chat to us.
No worries, thanks Fee.
You've now dealt with this little filly. You've trimmed her feet and had a look at her balance-wise. How's she looking?
She's looking very good. In fact, what we've done is when the foals are born, after about a week, we assess all of the foals. We'll give them a walk-up and we'll check for any flexural or angular or rotational deviations, skeletal balance, and then we take notes of them. And if we have any issues, we'll do regular follow-ups, either weekly or bi-weekly. In the case of her, she's a nice correct foal, so we only need to see her at the end of the month when she's basically due for her first trim, which was today. So we've given her a first trim and it all went well. And from now on, if we don't have any other issues, we'll only see her once a month, every month, and just keep her trimmed up.
Yeah, she is a smashing looking filly, isn't she? Beautiful, and nice size as well.
Very nicely put together.
Just tell us, for the people that don't know, what would you do if you've got a filly that's not correct?
Okay, it depends upon the problem. We have what we call angular deviations, where you'll have what we call, K-knees, that type of thing. If need be, we'll put an extension on just to help grow the limb correctly. We have our flexural deviations where the foal might go upright or they're very slack. And then with that, sometimes it's nutrition based, sometimes it's pain related, depending on whether it's unilateral, bilateral. And then we just assess them according to that, and we follow through with whatever we need to do on them.
So there's all sorts of ways it can be corrected?
There are all sorts of ways that can be corrected, and as long as we as a team are all on top of it, normally we do well and we get them into the sales ring and onto the race course.
Well, as we said, luckily our little girl here is looking very correct, and she's got some beautiful feet on her.
Yeah, no, she is. She's a beautiful specimen. As we know, she's really well bred. So we're hoping for a bright future from her.
Well, we've spoken to Robbie Miller, the farrier. Now we're going to have a chat with Gavin, who's been watching the progress of this foal throughout her journey so far, and he's going to give us an update from his side. Gavin, she's a smashing looking foal. We met her a few weeks ago. She's now 7 weeks, and wow, she's grown and she looks like she's doing all the right things.
No, she's a lovely filly, this strong, pretty correct, typical of the sire, actually Gold Standard. He's been throwing some really nice sorts across the board through all different types of mares, so we're quite thrilled with them. And yeah, this filly is now on her way, 7 weeks old. From here on, she will just literally be a horse, out in the paddocks every day. We'll keep an eye on them closely, bring them in every week just to assess them, make sure everything is still going the right way. Robbie will carry on doing them once a month, all going well. And then, the next stage will be when she hits about 5 or 6 months old. That's when the major change in her life will be, where we start weaning and taking the mothers away, and then they start being big horses. Yeah,
life starts to get a little bit harder for her then, but she's a lovely filly. And also it's lovely because you're handling them as you bring them in and out, and she's already quite quiet and easy to deal with. Yeah,
look, we handle them from day one. As soon as they're born, they are handled like the guys are now, so they are used to us touching them and holding them and getting them on their way. And every week, like I said, we assess them, and then during the days the guys will always catch them every day in the camps. We give them probiotics and stuff like that, so that the handling is an ongoing thing, and by the time they are 6 months old and ready to be weaned, they are easy to manage, and we don't have any problems with them.
And Mum's doing really well here as well, National Banker. She's a lovely mare, isn't she?
Old girl, she's actually very close to retirement now. We've covered her again with Gold Standard just because this foal is such a nice one, and hopefully next year then she will retire and live out her days happy.
Gavin, thanks very much for taking the time. We'll catch up with you again soon.
Sure, thank you.
Well, to all our viewers, this little filly, this Gold Standard filly, she's doing really well. As you can see, she's grown a lot since we saw her last time, and she's going through all her stages. She's had the farrier, she's now got to grow a little bit more before weaning, and we'll come back and follow her again soon.
One of the hottest topics at the moment in South African racing is obviously the protocols and how we're getting on. We've had some great news recently, and we're going to be discussing that now with two guests here on the show. We've got James Goodman and also Adrian Todd. Firstly, gentlemen, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you,
Absolute pleasure.
Now, obviously, James, you've been a pioneer in terms of getting out and about internationally, and it's always been high up on your agenda for us to start trading again. And I know, and poor Adrian's had quite a lot of abuse during the course of his tenure trying to do that as well. It hasn't been easy. There's been a lot of politics involved, but it's such a vital thing for South African racing.
It is the lifeblood of South African racing, and you know, you got to take your hat off to these guys. Let's start off easy with them. You know, you got to just go easy because they're trying their best. And South Africa are the pariahs of the world in a lot of places. Not only the horse industry, but you think of all sporting codes and the problems that we've been through. And as far as our politics is concerned, no one likes us. Okay? And they don't like us because of our excellence. We are so good at everything, and we're very good at producing good horses. So no one wants to see us actually performing on a level playing field. I wouldn't do his job for anything.
I think let's just go into that as well, because obviously go back in time. We've had the ban. The 2 years expired, and obviously we were ready to trade. And the frustrating part for a lot of us, Toddy, is the fact that there's been such a long delay in terms of saying, right, we've done our ban, we've served our punishment, let's get up and trading, because it's affecting everybody in the industry.
That's very true, Grant. And as I've said many times before, we felt towards the end of 2018, the ban being up in June, but towards the end of 2018, we were ready and able to pass any audit. Our Department of Agriculture actually in March 2018 started to request the audit through the normal channels in preparation for the ban being up in June. As we all know, it didn't happen. Politics came into play. There was the poultry impasse. The EU wanted to negotiate concessions concerning poultry and were using horses as leverage. That took us about 8 months of solid negotiation, knocking on doors in Europe, pushing our politicians here to get involved. And I must say our Department of Trade and Industry, once they became involved, ITED it's called, the International Trade and Economic Development, wonderful job. They pushed, they listened to our story, they put horses on the agenda. We pushed in Europe, our connected friends in Europe helped, and we finally got them to agree that they would come and audit us. And what that meant was that they've separated the chicken issue from horses, totally apart. Now, of course, the next question is, when are they coming? Now, we expect to get that answer very, very soon. The next bilaterals are early December, and we're extremely confident that we will get that answer out of the EU then. But of course, once again, politics. Once they agreed to audit us, the date then became a negotiation, and that is an ongoing negotiation. What's South Africa going to concede in other fields in return for an earlier date? But we're working on that very hard, and I'm confident that we will get a date very, very soon, within weeks.
I think let's just go back a little bit as well, because you kind of changed tactics as well, because you were going through the routine of trying to get government here on site to assist you wherever, and obviously the chicken scenario wasn't helping. You then went on a little bit of a campaign and you highlighted the chicken issue. You went over and you spent a lot of time in Europe chatting to the guys. Obviously the team in Ireland were a big help to you as well, and there was a lot of leverage that had to happen from that side of the world rather than being stuck here in South Africa.
That's correct, Grant. You know, when we started, we had to convince the world that we were capable of putting in place and maintaining the health status that they wanted. We achieved that. And then when we got into the negotiation side of things, South Africa pushed very hard. But you're 100% correct that the breakthrough had to come from the European side, and that's what happened. They gave or conceded to coming to audit us. And that only was achieved by pushing from a European side. We had lots of help overseas and connections that got us in to see the top politicians over there and put our case to them. And they came to the realization that, yes, South Africa does deserve an audit.
I think before I hand over to James to field a couple of questions for you as well, I think having won the World Cup actually highlighted things in Africa as well, that if we do things together, I thought Siya Kolisi's speech was absolutely wonderful. If we stick together as a country, I mean, we've been a laughing stock of some of the countries as well, because we're the first people to shoot ourselves in the foot. We don't rally around each other. We don't really support each other in the game. It has started to change, and I think there's obviously communications now between the operators and all that, and I think people are seeing a bigger picture now that we are only going to succeed in this industry and get it back on track where we all want it to be if we work together as a team. And I think that's vital going forward as well. And I think you've seen some of that as well with some of you guys lobbying for you and some of the guys that have obviously been funding you as well.
No, definitely. I must say that, South Africa, especially in racing, has been divided for a long time, and I've definitely seen that there's a coming together of things, and the funders have been wonderful, keeping on supporting this, and as I said, we know it's taken a long time, but the goalposts kept moving due to political reasons, but now I believe we're finally there.
James, you've obviously got questions to ask Adrian as well, because you've been out and about. You were one of the guys that always said racing's an international game. We cannot be on our own, isolated. We're not going to survive.
Well, obviously, Grant, this industry in this country on an island cannot survive, especially with trading problems and lowering of betting turnovers and all these things that are affecting our product. The most important point that we can get over to anyone is that if we are able to export our product, the value of the product goes up, which means that everyone benefits. And there are people out there that say that not everyone benefits. There are trainers that I've spoken to that are still blinkered to the fact that it's not going to help us by selling horses overseas because they're going to pay more for a horse at the sales here. That doesn't make any sense to me. How do you see that, Adrian?
No, look, James, everybody's entitled to an opinion, and I think that there is, in certain quarters, as you just mentioned, a fear that will happen, that people will be priced out of the game, so to speak. But by the same token, South Africa, as you eloquently put it, cannot stay isolated as an island because we simply won't survive. The game will change. It won't just be horses going off overseas. It'll be foreign investors purchasing horses here to train here. It'll open up foreign sponsorship possibilities, international sponsorship of our races, extra money coming in. The whole game will change, as you and I have discussed many times, and you can't allow a fear of being on the international scene to hold you back. If you're worried about that, there's always Kenya you could move to and train there.
Exactly. Okay, so now let's go back a step and talk about the audit, because the audit seems to be on everyone's tongues at the moment. 2013 was the last audit we had.
Correct.
Did we pass it?
2013.
You weren't there, so you don't have to take the blame.
Is there a stronger word than failed? Because we failed that audit and we failed it dismally.
Okay, so we got that out the way. Now, the people out there don't know what an audit is. Please give us an idea of what an audit entails and how we pass it. Because you've done this, you know what the story is.
I think the first thing you have to look at, and this brings into what will probably be one of your other questions, where people ask, how can we expect to trade internationally when we struggle to move horses around in our own country? Well, I think we need to remove the concept of South Africa out of this. South Africa as a country is not important in what I'm about to say. There is a free zone, and it has its buffer zones, of course, and then there is infected. And that goes all the way from Johannesburg to Cairo, is all considered infected. Now,
the map, just on that point,
Yeah.
The map has changed from 2004, because the map I was looking at actually showed Kenya and to the north of Zimbabwe as the only infected zones. So the whole of Africa is infected.
The whole of Africa is infected,
Okay,
yes.
and
It's
Spain?
considered endemic. No, Spain's not. They have had outbreaks. They had one outbreak, I forget when it was two. It was actually 2 zebras from Namibia. But Spain's not considered infected. They closed that outbreak.
So the only free zone is in the Cape.
The only free zone is in
It's
the
actually
Cape.
Kenilworth, isn't it?
And a small area around there. That's correct. Now, the European Union has in place a number of regulations that they expect countries to comply with, because it's how they want to trade with a free zone. So a free European Union trading with a free South African zone. So their interest is, how does that free zone trade with the infected part of the country? So that's the reason for the controls. How the free zone is trading, almost as two separate countries, it has to be treated. And the 2013 audit highlighted a number of deficiencies. For example, in the surveillance zone now, we have 160 sentinel horses strategically placed around. I have a team that takes samples every month and they test them for AHS. In 2013, South Africa had 15 sentinel horses, all on the one farm. That's just one example. The movement system didn't really exist. It was administered by the province when they had time. It wasn't structured like it is now. And it's not just African horse sickness. Other disease reporting and control, Doreen, for example, was not even on the radar. South Africa had nothing that you could put into a report and say, we have these diseases under control and this is how we do it.
So it's actually far broader than horse sickness. Could be pyroplasmosis, any type of disease that's involved in horses.
And we've had to implement control systems for all of those things. The stud health scheme that the TPA administer for CEM, there's a whole host of things, but we're lucky in the sense that the protocol for how to deal with all those other diseases is standardized fairly much around the world. So we just had to implement, adapt, and carry on. It was African horse sickness, because that's unique to our situation, that we had to invent the system.
So in the surveillance zone, you've got all these sentinels. There can't be any cases of African horse sickness in the surveillance zone?
No, we haven't had cases in the surveillance zone in 3 years now.
So that's a huge plus, because that's where our problems emanate, isn't it? That's where they came from.
Our problems have always been because of cases in the surveillance zone. Now, studies have shown that all of the recent ones, all the way back to the early 2000s, have been caused by vaccine. Revergence to virulence, they call it. And what we've done in order to fix that problem, to put it in layman's terms, is to adjust the vaccination times. You can now only vaccinate in winter when the midge, the Culicoides midge, is less active.
It's dormant then, yeah.
It's dormant, yeah. You know, they're still around,
So
but not in the numbers you need.
That means that in the winter, if a horse does contract African horse sickness, it has been through a vaccine, or it shows symptoms of African horse sickness.
If you got a case of African horse sickness in the winter, you know, I would say that there could be a possibility of it being either, but you still need the vector to transmit it. So the chances of it happening are much, much lower than in the summertime. So that's why we're now vaccinating in the winter.
Is that not going to impact on your audit?
No.
Come the audit time, they turn around and say, oh, well, there still are cases of African horse sickness.
No, not there's not in the surveillance zone.
Yeah.
We know that, because if there were, we would know and we would get banned again. The European Union's and everybody else's legislation takes into account that we use a live vaccine and just want to have that we've got tests in place and that we're addressing it by only vaccinating in the winter period when the midge is less active.
The question that I need to ask you, and this is the problem that I think is perceived out there, the European Union, to get us passed as a trading partner, okay, need to convince 27 vets. Is that correct? Because I was told that if they don't get all 27 vets on board, and you can answer me if I'm wrong, if they don't get all 27 vets on board, it's like a hung jury in the United States when you get 11 guys say that the guy's guilty of murder and one says not, so it's a hung jury and it doesn't get passed. Can we get 27 vets to agree?
It's not that simple.
It's not simplistic.
It's not simplistic. You see, what happens is you get an audit by the Food and Veterinary Office, and then the Food and Veterinary Office send their report to South Africa. with recommendations. Now, trust me, it's any audit you do, whether it be an audit of disease control systems, whether it be a financial audit, nobody has ever received an audit report that says 100% fine. There's always a recommendation about something. And then you have to respond as to how you're going to address that. And then there's a little committee called PAF, which is Plant, Animal, Food and Feed. And PAF is the European Commission's Committee on things relating to plants, animals, food and feed. It then goes there with a recommendation from the European Union or the European Commission. And as long as we've passed the audit to a degree where everybody's now happy, the Commission's recommendation is to reinstate South Africa. Now, we will always also be going through a process of what we call CVO education, which is Chief Veterinary Officer education of the member countries concerned. But we've already been actively lobbying that. That's what we've been doing for years now, or since I've been involved in the last 2 years at the International Movement of Horses Committee meetings, at private meetings with various countries' chief veterinary officers, is giving our side. This is what South Africa has in place. It's all about networking, and you know that very well.
Yeah.
It's very easy to say no to something that you consider to be a strange, foreign and exotic disease. But when you get to interact with the people, you get to understand the competence that's in place and the system that is in place. And a European Commission recommendation of a pass is very strong, because the thing you have to remember here is we're not negotiating a totally new protocol. We have the protocol. We updated the protocol with the EU in April last year even. That takes into account that we have a live vaccine, that we have African horse sickness in a lot of the country. So the question is, they've laid down the rules under which they will trade with us. It's simply a question of, do we comply with those rules?
Okay, so that's the most, if we get through the audit with the recommendations we're able to prescribe to, the greatest news that I heard, and you can tell me if this is true or not, is that the Hong Kong Jockey Club are very keen to not only put money in this process, but also take our horses.
The Hong Kong Jockey Club have been immensely helpful right from the start. They've provided technical support. You're correct, they've provided financial support to vaccine development. Because just to stray off topic a little bit, or off subject right now, remember how I said our concern always is that in the control zones it's been vaccine-related outbreaks. A safer, inactivated vaccine would permanently stop any of that happening ever again, because it's not a live vaccine. So they've been very instrumental behind driving vaccine development and research as well. And yes, they do want to take our horses. And yes, we have a protocol in place with Hong Kong as well. Anybody can look it up on the internet. It's exactly the same as the European protocol, 40 days. It's under temporary suspension. Our government, and I was in the meeting, have held meetings with not just the Hong Kong Jockey Club, but the Hong Kong government. And they will come and conduct their own inspection straight after the European Union. And we should be back on track with Hong Kong as well.
Adrian, there was a comment made as well that once we back on board and we've passed the audit, the time that we're talking about could possibly be 14 days and 14 days. How far along the line are we with that?
With Hong Kong, it's 40 days.
40.
That has to be renegotiated. Now you see, the European Union, remember I said now we updated the protocol with them in April of 2018. It stays at the 40 days with the current facility, or allows for 14 days from a vector-proof facility. Now that would be a quarantine facility where the horses went inside and were not allowed out for the 14-day period, pressure controlled, etc., etc. So yes, technically we will be able to trade with 14 days. We don't have that facility yet. My thought process has always been, let's get past the audit, let's get trading, and then we can discuss building new facilities.
Okay, in terms of the Kenilworth quarantine station right now as we speak. Is that a vector protected facility?
That is a vector-proof facility, but it doesn't have, because it's separate barns, it doesn't really have an exercise area or anywhere where you could get the horses out. If you kept them locked up for a 14-day period, it would need to go through a conversion process, which has been looked at, and it wouldn't be that difficult.
And if things were to come right, and there was a lot of talk about, you mentioned yourself, maybe international sponsors, maybe an international race, how would that work in terms of them coming in? Would they have to be based at Kenilworth, and would that be the training yard as well as the quarantine station?
That would be the ultimate plan. Currently, all import stations are controlled by the government, and export stations can be private. But the longer term plan would be to be able to use that quarantine station for both. It's in the free zone. It doesn't have resident horses, so that would be the long-term plan for horses coming in. They would come in and they would go straight back out of that stable, yeah.
Okay, my last two questions before I hand to James to finish off with his last couple of questions. Question number one, if I would say to you on a percentage chance of you passing the audit, how convinced are you that you've got things in the right order to be able to pass with flying colours?
Totally. And it's not just me that's convinced. Our government's convinced. South Africa has had a pretty rough history with audits in general, not just for horses. So in order to go back and request an audit, our government had to be convinced that they'd pass. On a number of occasions, we've already done dry runs. We brought in Osvet right at the beginning of this process to do a risk assessment study, highly internationally respected. We brought in Dr. Desmond Leyden and Professor Warwick Bailey on 2 occasions to conduct pre-audits, to tell us where they thought we were, what we needed to pick up. We've got a plan in place once the date's secured to do at least 3 or 4 dry runs for the audit. Grant, I'm confident when I say there is nothing more that we can do. We're continually rechecking, and I can tell you that our traceability system is better than anything they've got in Europe. And the proof of that is that the Europeans have now been discussing with our organisation how they could possibly look at adapting and adopting our traceability system. So I think we've implemented a system that's frustrating for people, I know, but I have no doubt that it will pass with flying colours.
And once we've got through that, obviously, then you've got room. Once you're trading, then you've got room to start negotiating. And obviously the first part of your priority was to get trading. And the more difficult question I'm going to ask you is, when do you think this audit will take place?
I'm hoping to have it secured within the next couple of weeks to take place as early as possible in the new year. Now, I don't want to jinx myself here by putting a date on it. I know what I think, but I've learnt not to be too bullish about that in public, because it comes back to haunt you. So I'm very bullish that within the next few weeks I will get the date out of them and we will know. And I'm hoping to have it as early as possible in the new year.
Your political experience has certainly been enhanced during the last couple of years. James, in closing, for a couple of questions for
In
Adrian.
closing, I only have one question to ask, which is on everyone's lips. Okay, we get the audit passed, which it seems to be pretty close to certain. In your mind, we're certain to get the audit passed. So let's now move away from 2013, where we've been in the wilderness since then, where we failed dismally, as you say. We now get the audit passed. Are you and your body of people going to then run this thing to completion, where we're able to export horses in the very near future after the audit is passed at better and better rates, if I can put it that way, like better rates, meaning that go get to the eventual 14 days where we can get a horse into the vector protected facility and get it out? Are you going to go the whole hog, Adrian? You and the SADPH?
Look, the organisation will have to stay in place to monitor and maintain the control systems. Once we get trading, that's that's something that'll have to be discussed on a broader level. What does the broader industry want to do? Do they want to put in place that quarantine station that'll be able to do the 14 days and fund it? You know, I think you've got to take it as a step-by-step process. Once people see that we're trading, it's a different field that you'll be having the conversation about going forward from there.
Because it leads me to the whole point of this trading, not to get our top horses out this country and go and race for top horses, to get the bottom of the road horses that the country and the rest of the world are selling to Asia and places like that, and China, for money which we could not, it's eye-watering to us, the money that we could be selling these horses to. That to me is the prize at the end of the day. The pot of gold is to be able to sell all those horses that win a race or a barrier trial, and hopefully we'll end up getting barrier trials countrywide. That's one of the projects that I'm on at the moment. So that we're in place to be able to say 14 days you can buy your horse, you can go through the vector protected area, it can do the PVR test, because the PVR test apparently 24 hours now.
Yeah, you can turn that around in 24 hours, yeah.
That's the pot of gold for South Africa.
No, exactly, and you understand exactly where the 14 days comes from, because that allows for the incubation period of the virus. So you test, lock them up for as long as the incubation period is, test again.
Test again and they can go.
And they can go.
It's fabulous. I'm honestly, I must take my hat off to you. I have sat and watched this since 1990 or 1989 when I started really getting involved in this. I think to myself, this can never work. But you made progress. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
For an Aussie, you haven't done bad.
I think, James, I think what I said earlier on as well, I think the industry needs to rally around this initiative. It is the lifeblood of the game. We really do need to stick together. We need to give Adrian and his team the utmost support, because we are this close now.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, if we blow this one now,
Yeah.
I think we're in big trouble. And this is our big opportunity.
It's like a sort of catchphrase the industry's got to rally around. But when you look at this industry, my goodness gracious, we do rally around. I know there's factions, and there's always going to be factions in everything you do. Amongst the ANC, there's factions, okay? Everyone has factions. But the end prize, as far as I think everyone is concerned, is to get to what I call the pot of gold. Get horses.
Absolutely. But as you mentioned earlier on, there are a couple of camps that are saying, well, maybe exporting isn't going to be great for the country. That couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, can you imagine you were still a trainer and you had an opportunity now to take your best sprinter to go to the Hong Kong international races, and you can go there for your owner, for you as a trainer, and race for 15 million rand? That's
right,
bad.
you know what, me as a trainer, you know what I'd rather be doing? I'd rather be putting them through barrier trials and selling them to Vietnam and Korea and China and all India, Pakistan. They're all markets for us, and they're markets that would
You were never a good traveller yourself either. So.
change the way we see our breeding industry, because the breeding industry is the birth of this whole thing.
Yeah.
The racing then comes after that, and if the breeding industry is powerful and not so volatile, because at the moment it's tremendously volatile, you're going to find that people are going to get involved in breeding horses.
Well, we haven't even touched on the fact. If you look to where Australia was prior to them being able to bring shuttle stallions into their racing jurisdiction,
Correct.
they were behind us.
Yeah.
It was the shuttle stallion business that's actually elevated them to where they are today, and we'll have access to that now. And I think it's going to be a very exciting times for us indeed.
I'm 110% behind you guys, and I just wish you the best. And I just, obviously we all pray that nothing goes wrong. If everything goes according to plan, hats off to you, because no one else has been able to do it. In my lifetime, I've watched no one else has been able to do it. A big kudos to you guys, because it's been very difficult.
We haven't got it quite right yet, but we're almost there, James.
James, thanks very much. Great having you on the show. Adrian, as always, thank you very much. And
Thank you, Grant.
I know you've always had an open door policy. If guys want to contact you and ask questions, you're happy to take those calls as
by
well.
all
And
means.
let's all hold thumbs. It's a massive game changer for South African racing, and hopefully it's just around the corner. Right, just a reminder that we are calling for entries for our Groom of the Month. It's a fantastic initiative brought to you by GFox, and we look forward to getting some entries in from you and rewarding those grooms for outstanding service and excellence. We've also got the highlights of today's Summer Cup brought to you, and we'll be playing out with that towards the end of the show. But before we do that, let's bring you this week's Foal of the Week.
And here comes Fire Away! Fire Away in the Danger's Hour.
Fantastic race day here out at Turffontein, and what a facility they put on here at Turffontein. The marquees have been excellent. There's been giant Ferris wheels. There's been a whole host of actions for both punters and non-racing enthusiasts, and a fantastic crowd turned out in what turned out to be a great day's racing. We're going to play out the show with highlights from the 2019 Summer Cup.
Flag up, speeds on, and they racing in the Merchants. Clever Guy was a length slow. Van Halen also a little bit sluggish off the mark. Ultra Magnus, Basilius, Warrior's Rest also broke out well. William the Silence is towards the outside, joined by Gimme a Wave. Down to Zero is just off them. The grey is Mardi Gras. Prince of Kahal in the mix as well, just about 3 lengths off the leader, joined by Sir Frenchie. Then towards the extreme inside, Sunset Eyes. He stuck to his stations. Valbon directly behind Ultra Magnus in the black and white. Captain Aldo being scrubbed along. Rebels Champ is towards the rear, but he can come from there. Vane Calder was further back in the field. And then comes Van Halen as they head down towards the final 600 meters. William the Silence and Gimme a Wave towards the outside. Warrior's Rest. Prince of Kahal in the race. Ultra Magnus. Then comes Basilius. Mardi Gras towards the extreme outside. Valbon, Sir Frenchie been asked to run along as they now get to the final 250. Mardi Gras. Gimme a Wave. Warrior's Rest. Ultra Magnus. The 4 of them go clear. Further back to Prince of Kahal. Van Halen is gaining ground. Mardi Gras hits the front. Runs away. Mardi Gras takes the lead and has won. Mardi Gras back to winning ways. Mardi Gras beats into second. Warrior's Rest. Then came Van Halen and Ultra Magnus. It's a Sean Tarry 1-2. Mardi Gras proper sprinter.
Shango further back, and then came Frosted Gold, Battle of Alicia and John Hancock. Homeward bound in the tab, Betting World Dingon's 500 to go. In front is Don DeVere, Eden Rock, Marshall being asked for the effort, the outside, 3 to make up. Cockney Pride down the inside, Shango's running on. Frosted Gold is down there inside, 300 to go. Don DeVere, Cockney Pride. Eden Rock has still got 2 to go. Marshall's gone out the back door and Frosted Gold is running on. It's the filly Cockney Pride, joined up front by Frosted Gold. Shango is back in third, then Don DeVere, but it's Frosted Gold. Here comes Shango with a good looking run, and Shango has picked it up in the tab. Betting World Dingon, Shango by 2.5. Frosted Gold, Cockney Pride, Battle of Alicia, then Eden Rock. Further back. .2,000 metres, they're all set, and here they come in the Gauteng Chris Gerber Summer Cup. Al Mutawakel broke well, Queen Supreme is quickly away, Infamous Fox, Zilzal is on the far side. They're also up there too, and right up there too is Socrat, who chases up for the lead. Behind that is Infamous Fox, Dawn Assault. Back on the rail, then we got Flying Winger. Further back in the field comes Shenanigans, who's about 7 or 8 lengths off the leader. Down in midfield, we've got Cascapedia's racing about 10 off them. They followed by Barrahen. Further to the outside is Marching On Together. Green Haze and Divine Odyssey, they quite well back in Cygnus and Bees. Then came Sunshine Silk, and Camphoratus is the trailer now as they go away towards the 1,200 metre marker, and Zilzal has got to the lead here. It's Zilzal out in front, that leads. Back in second is Dawn Assault. Atyab is on the rail, is racing 3 lengths off the leader. Further back to Al Mutawakel, Queen Supreme's got 5 to go. In behind that towards the inside is Shenanigans. Socrat is outside a runner's got 8 or 9 lengths to make up. Infamous Fox is just ahead of that. Further back down the field is Tilbury Fort, and then came Divine Odyssey, and Barrahen's got 10 to make up. Marching On Together as they turn for homes, 12 lengths off the leader. Further back to Bees, and behind that came in Cygnus and Camphoratus. 500 to go here, and out in front is Zilzal by 2. Second is Atyab. Down along the inside is Al Mutawakel. Down the centre, Queen Supreme with 4 to make up. Socrat tries to make up the ground, 5 out. Behind those came Infamous Fox, and Roy Had Enough is in behind those. 300 metres left to go. Zilzal, Al Mutawakel on the outside, Queen Supreme, Atyab. Socrat is making up the ground right up on the outside. It's Al Mutawakel, Zilzal. Socrat is right up on the outside. Here comes Socrat. Down the inside, Zilzal, Zilzal and Socrat. Zilzal has beaten Socrat. Third place will go to Al Mutawakel, Roy Had Enough and Queen Supreme.
The white colours at her outside, Ray's Riviera, Pretty Border, Ronnie's Candy and Perfect Tigress. In line for home past the 600 metres mark they go. Running Brave has got a 5-length advantage. Wisteria Walker's second. Then comes Skippers up the centre of the course. The grey is Snow Palace. Vistula's towards the outside. And the dancers trying to get into the race as well. Running Brave is weary, and Wisteria Walk went up to join. At their outside is Skippers. Then comes Ronnie's Candy from the back of the field. She's starting to look dangerous in the dance in between runners. Wisteria Walk in front, but Ronnie's Candy has built up a head of steam. She moved up, she took the lead. Ronnie's Candy, Wisteria Walk in the dance, Perfect Tigress. Ronnie's Candy saves her best for the big occasion. Ronnie's Candy wins. Second goes to In the Dance. Then came Wisteria Walk and Perfect Tigress.